Okay, we're going to call this meeting to order at 1 o'clock, and the proceedings of this meeting will be recorded and made available on the internet. Please, Mrs. Clerk, can you conduct the roll?
Mayor Clarkson, are you present?
I am.
Deputy Mayor Windover?
Present.
Councillor Armstrong?
Present.
Councillor Franzen?
Present.
And Councillor Lambshead has sent his regrets. For staff, we have Donna Taggart, CIO Treasurer.
Present.
Dylan Kosh, Director of Recreation and Facilities.
Present.
Evan Grieger, Director of Public Works.
Present.
Adele Arbor, Planner.
Present.
Ann Ruth, Deputy Clerk.
Present.
Barb Waldron, Director of Building and Planning, CBO.
Present.
Sarah Delamarter, Junior Planner. Is present, maybe experiencing mic issues. Bianca Dragicevic, Legislative Coordinator, Executive Assistant to the CAO.
Present.
Chelsea Carpenter, Supervisor of Waste Public Works Coordinator.
Present.
And Jesse Clark, Director of Corporate Services Clerk, is present.
Thank you, Jesse. Now we're going to do the land acknowledgement followed by a moment of reflection. We respectfully acknowledge that Trent Lakes and Peterborough County are located on the Treaty 20 Mississauga territory, and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations, which include Alderville, Beausoleil, Curve Lake, Georgina Island, Hiawatha, Rama, and Scugog Island First Nations. Trent Lakes respectfully acknowledges that the Williams Treaty First Nations are the stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. We will now take a moment to reflect on these principles and our duties and responsibilities as members of council. Thank you. Now, we would like to express our sympathies to Chelsea Carpenter, Supervisor of Waste and Public Works Coordinator, on the passing of her grandfather. And I think we also want to acknowledge the horrific situation that has taken place in the territory in northern Saskatchewan. Mm-hmm. And our sympathies certainly go out to all people who are involved in that. Our thoughts are with you. Disclosure of pecuniary interest, and I'm going to remind council members of their obligation to declare any pecuniary interest that they may have at this time or at any time in the future. Can we have a motion to approve the agenda, please? Deputy Mayor Windover and Councillor Franzen, all in favor? That motion has carried. We're going to get the adoption of the regular council minutes of August the 9th, statutory public meeting August the 9th, special council meeting August the 10th, and special public meeting August the 10th, 2022. Motion to adopt all minutes, please. Councillor Franzen and Councillor Armstrong, all in favor? Motion is carried. Committee and boards, Economic Development Advisory Committee, August the 2020. Motion to receive August the 8th. Deputy Mayor Windover and Councillor Armstrong, all in favor? Motion has carried. Liaison reports for council boards and committees. Do we have any reports from council? Seeing none. Biggest business arising out of a previous meeting. And Ruth, Deputy Clerk, Committee and Board Structure Review.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Clarkson. A report regarding the committee and board structure review was brought forward at the August 9th council meeting and was deferred pending comments from the chairs of the Parks, Recreation and Culture Advisory Committee and the Economic Development Advisory Committee. Staff reached out to the chairs of both advisory committees to request any comments, including information regarding member interest in potential term extension. This memorandum brings forward their responses. Staff's recommendation remains as presented in the August 9th report to Council. Should Council wish to extend the terms of the existing public appointees to the advisory committees, it's recommended that the term for the public appointees be extended to the end of January 2023, as both the Economic Development, Tourism and Recovery Strategic Plan and the Open Spaces Master Plan projects are scheduled to be completed by the end of that month. This would allow the existing committees to see these projects through to completion. Thank you.
Okay, motion and then discussion, please. Councillor Armstrong?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I would make a motion to extend the term of the public appointees on both committees through January 2023. And I would add to that, that if re-elected, the current council representatives also continue on this committee until the end of January.
Now, does that make provision for the people who are on that committee who don't get reelected?
Well,
Or
my sense is,
Or-
implicit in that is no, they would not continue on if they're not re-elected, they're not part of council, they would not continue on the committees.
okay, so then that means that anybody who steps back, like who retires. So there's going to be roles to be filled in those committees if they're going to have voting, right?
Well, it'll be a council member, right? You mean, when you sit down, will not be responsibility of a council member to join her? Is that the way it's set?
Well, let me split them up. Let's make this easy. So the first motion is simply to retain or extend the term of the public members of the two advisory committees through January 2023. So let's do that.
Jesse?
So I withdraw that first motion.
Thank you. Through you, could I just clarify, Councillor Armstrong, that you wanted the remainder of the resolution that's in the report that also speaks to the Committee of Adjustment? I just want to make sure that that's captured. That directs staff to review bylaw B 2018-2022 and report back to council on opportunities to expand the appeal role of the Committee of Adjustment.
Correct. It's only the last sentence in that recommended motion that I'm changing.
You're, okay.
Try it again, Jesse.
You would also not be
Am I
going,
missing something?
you would also not be wanting the fourth that. Or you will, you wanted
I
to
think that would-
postpone the posting. Okay,
I think that would continue. It's
Okay.
just the timing would change.
What happens then if you just say the existing?
no, we're good. Yep, we'll just keep everything except change the last one to all appointments will expire on January 31st, 2023.
Right.
Okay.
I'll second that motion.
Okay, and any more discussion? Nope, all in favor? Passed.
Now, do we need to deal with the council representatives, or shall we defer that until October and then determine what representation council needs?
That's what I would recommend. Wait till after election and then we can determine how we want to have council representation on the committees.
I guess my only concern would be if there are current council reps and they are re-elected, it would be nice to have them continue for the sake of continuity.
That would be my assumption.
Through Mayor Clarkson, if I may.
Sure.
Help us out, Ann.
Just best practice, I would recommend that the council representatives for the advisory committees be appointed by the newly elected council in the new term. Thank you.
Keep it simple, stupid, my
Yep.
pottery teacher
That's
used to
fine.
say.
Sure.
That's fine.
Do you need a motion to that effect, Jesse, or just a note?
That's good.
Okay, statutory public meeting pursuant to the Planning Act. We need a motion to suspend the regular meeting. Deputy Mayor Windover and Councillor Armstrong, all in favor? Motion is carried. Okay, Sarah, you're on.
Are you able to hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Through you, Madam Mayor, this is a public meeting under Section 34 of the Planning Act to consider an amendment to the municipality's comprehensive zoning bylaw, B 2014-070. A notice of public meeting for today's applications containing the prescribed information was circulated to all landowners within a 120-meter radius of the subject lands at least 20 days prior to this meeting. The notice was also mailed to all prescribed agencies, public bodies, and persons in accordance with the regulations. Anyone wanting to be notified of any decision from today's public meeting must send in a written request to either myself or the clerk, and the notice of passing will be mailed to them, setting out the method and manner in which appeals may be made to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Please note that if a person does not send a written comment prior to the passing of the bylaw or make an oral submission at a public meeting, that person may not be entitled to appeal the decision. Thank you. So this is a public meeting for file number 22-19 to consider a zoning bylaw amendment submitted by agent Holly Richards Conley on behalf of the property owners Paul and Susan Ventresca for the shoreline residential lot known municipally as 61 Saunders Road. The subject land has a lot area of approximately 0.25 hectares and a shoreline frontage of approximately 51.4 meters. The lot is currently occupied by an 83.3 square meter detached single-story dwelling, a 79.8 square meter attached deck, a 32.2 square meter boathouse, a 29.2 square meter accessory detached garage, and a 10 square meter greenhouse. The applicant is proposing a replacement dwelling with a ground floor area of 265 square meters, an attached carport with a ground floor area of 42.9 square meters, a screened-in deck with a floor area of 20.9 square meters, a covered deck with a floor area of 53.5 square meters, and a new detached accessory garage with a ground floor area of 92.2 square meters. It is noted that the existing boathouse and greenhouse are intended to be retained. There is a planning report on today's agenda from the municipality's external planning consultant, Chris Jones. Chris's report notes that in order to construct the new dwelling and detached garage, the applicant requires relief from the 20% maximum lot coverage provision, 20% to the proposed 20.24%, in addition to the water yard setback, 30 meters to 10.6 meters, and the interior side yard setback, 4.5 meters to 3.74 meters. It is also noted that both the definition of deck and patio under the bylaw B 2014-070 does not allow for a roof. On this basis, the proposed zoning amendment would also require relief from these definitions to permit the lake-facing roofed deck/patio. Chris's report identifies that the proposal is considered infill development according to the growth plan, and it is also noted that the proposal is generally consistent with the provincial policy statement. It is noted that while the proposal generally maintains the existing water yard setback of the existing dwelling, the footprint of the proposed new dwelling is substantially larger than the existing dwelling. Chris's report notes that the substantial vegetation removal and site alteration will be required to be addressed for the proposal. Under this basis, it is recommended that the development of the lot be subject to a site plan agreement, and furthermore, the applicant provide the municipality with a shoreline restoration plan as a measure to compensate for removals and alterations necessary to accommodate the new dwelling, garage, and septic system. Chris notes that staff are not supportive of the increase in lot coverage or the covered deck/patio with the floor area of 53.5 square meters. The municipality is in receipt of several comments pertaining to the proposal. Comments received from Curve Lake First Nations recommends an archaeological assessment where soils are to be disturbed. Peterborough Public Health has commented that they have no objection to the proposal. Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Board have indicated that they have no identifiable concerns related to the proposal. Agent Holly Richards Conley is available on the line for any questions. Further, if any members of the public did not register with the clerk indicating their intent to make an oral submission, but would like to do so at this time, please use the raise a hand feature so that we were able to promote you in order for you to make an oral submission. Thank you.
Okay, do we have comments from council or the agent?
Hi, good afternoon. It's Holly Richards Conley online. Through you, I just wanted to address a couple of comments that were in the recommendations from Chris in the memo. The first one about the 0.24% over the 20%. We have no issues decreasing the size of the proposed detached garage to bring that sort of lot coverage number down to 20%. It's a minimal change, a loss of about 60 square feet. So we have no issues with that. However, I just want to clarify some wording that was used in the memo. There is no deck on the water side of the structure. There's a landscaped patio, and then there's the timber frame porch, and the timber frame porch itself is entirely landscaped. So there's no deck, there's no piers for a deck, there's nothing like that. The roof line, if we can, Sarah, can you zoom in a little bit to the front of the cottage on your screen? Is that possible? Just where we can see the timber frame porch. Okay, so you can see that on one side of the timber frame porch, there's a landscaped patio, and then on the other side, there is a screen room. The roof line linking the landscape patio, which is actually the master bedroom, and the screen room, that roof line, even if we were to, eliminate this timber frame porch, which we don't want to, that roof line would not change significantly. And I did have discussions with Chris via email about this, and in eliminating or decreasing that timber frame land sort of area, we would only lose about 14.5 square meters, which is a very small amount of space. But I don't know if it's really hard to look at the building plans on this house just because they're so detailed and whatnot. But this is sort of the center of the home, this timber frame porch. This is, if you're building a cottage, this is the feature that you want on a lakeside house. This is where their family is going to gather and barbecue and cook, and this is the space you want on a rainy day on a lakeside property. So we would really, really like council to consider leaving that landscaped porch as part of the application.
Okay. Comments or questions?
I have a
Councillor
question to our planning staff through you, Mayor. Would that set any kind of precedent? Because I know we've told people in the past that they can't have screened-in porch with a roof.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to you, Councillor Franzen. Based on my knowledge of the covered porch situation and how I kind of go about them with planning applications and minor variances, I treat covered areas as habitable. So as long as it's not getting any closer to the high water mark in general, I'm in support. I believe Chris's comments pertaining to not supporting the timber porch was due to the lot coverage issue, but I could confer with him to clarify that for sure.
Anyone else?
I'm just like, I know it was nothing in this, but that boathouse, is that on somebody else's property?
I don't know.
Yeah, on the end? I don't know.
I don't think that's an issue where that's
No,
concerned.
I'm just
So-
curious. So it was both out there permit, I guess.
So Sarah, we don't vote on this now. We come back to this, right? Or do you want us to vote on this now? Yes.
Through you, the public meeting is meant to gather information for council, and then upon rising from the public meeting, you'll make a decision on this file.
Yeah, okay. So have we answered all the questions, or do we have more for this one?
So
Okay, all right. Can we move to the next one then, please?
Thank you through you, Madam Mayor. This is a public meeting for file number 22-24 to consider zoning bylaw amendment submitted by Agent Emma Drake of DM Wills Associates Limited on behalf of the property owner Sheila Cheshire for the lot known municipally as 6 LaPlante Road. The subject lands to be rezoned were the subject of a severance approval known as file B-66-20 on December 10th, 2021. This authorized the creation of a severed lot and retained lot, each with a lot area of approximately 0.29 hectares and a frontage on LaPlante Road of 95 meters. The application for rezoning has been submitted to fulfill a condition of consent approval, given that the severed and retained lots are both deficient in terms of minimum lot area, which is 0.4 hectares in the Hamlet residential zone. Additionally, the consent application was accompanied by an environmental impact study, which recommended that a small area to the northerly lot be rezoned to environmental protection for the purpose of creating a natural buffer from the adjacent wetland. The southerly retained lot is currently occupied by an existing dwelling, which appears to be compliant with the requisite setbacks of the Hamlet residential zone. The municipality is in receipt of several comments pertaining to the proposal. Comments received from Peterborough Public Health stated that they have no objection to the proposal. Kawartha Pine Ridge District School Board have indicated that they have no identifiable concerns related to the proposal. Agent Emma Drake is available on the line for any questions. Further, if any members of the public did not register with the clerk indicating their intent to make an oral submission but would like to do so at this time, please use the raise a hand feature so that we are able to promote you in order for you to make an oral submission. Thank you.
Okay, council comments.
So was that one lot divided up into two?
Looks like 5.
Was it?
Sarah, can you comment to Deputy Mayor Windover's question?
Yeah, thank you through you. So the lot in question is the one that's been kind of outlined in the darker black there. There's a little faint line down the center of this where the severed lot has been created from the retained. So it's just been one severance, but there's that rezoning to the north for that environmental protection zone.
I didn't think you could sever a separate lot.
Did you hear the question, Sarah?
A severed lot.
A separate lot to begin with. The
I
lot
could
was severed
take-
off the original property and now we're severing another lot off. I just didn't know. I didn't think that was legal. I don't know. Can we do that?
This, it would depend on how old that old severance is.
Age? Yeah, okay. That's, I'm just curious about, is there?
Yep.
What's the year like?
I'd have to check my records for that. I'm not sure.
Just curious, you know, because maybe someone else has the same kind of situation they want to look at.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I believe it's the 15-year time period, but we could provide some additional information when we bring back the actual bylaw.
So if it was severed and then anything like longer than 15 years ago, you can re-sever it?
Yes, you could, because you're creating 2 additional lots.
Okay. Yeah, just curious, yeah.
That's my understanding, but we can check with the.
Yeah, just curious, yeah. I guess it was severed a while ago. I mean, I don't think it's just being done right now, is it? Or is it being severed right now?
I think the new one, but I think what you're saying is the old one which goes back beyond
Yeah,
15
I'm
years.
just curious. Yeah. No
Okay,
problem, no
so-
problem, yeah.
Any other questions concerning this one? Certainly need lots in the hamlet.
Mhm.
Okay, now we need a motion to reconvene the regular meeting. Motion, please. Councillor Armstrong and Deputy Mayor Windover, all in favor. Motion is carried. Business arising from this meeting. Sarah, please.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. There was a public meeting held for file number 22-19. At this time, staff are recommending that council receives the report from the external planning consultant, Chris Jones, and that direction be given to 1, prepare a zoning bylaw amendment to authorize the requested relief with the exception of the roof over the lake facing deck patio and an increase to lot coverage, and 2, require the applicant to provide a shoreline restoration plan to mitigate and restore the loss of vegetation and site alteration to accommodate development and enter into a site plan agreement to require implementation of such measures. Thank you.
Now, Sarah, this doesn't limit them having the deck out front with the patio underneath.
Yeah, it does.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the first recommendation states, with the exception of the roof over the lake-facing deck patio.
Now, isn't that the one that they really would like to have because of a gathering space?
Yes.
Well, I, for one, don't see anything wrong with that. What about the rest of council? Yes.
I have another question, if I may. Sarah, what about the request for an archaeological assessment that was submitted by Curve Lake First Nation?
Chris did not indicate that on his recommendations. Based on his report where he stated that a lot of vegetation and soil would be disturbed. I mean, I haven't seen the site myself, so I wouldn't be able to, or I did see the site, I went out and posted, but as for, let me just take a look at the photos here. As for recommending whether the site has been disturbed, to the point for an archaeological, I would say it does look like the land hasn't been disturbed, perhaps to the north, but there is a lot of landscaping. A lot of armor stone has been introduced. There's a big garden over to the part of the lot where they want to decrease that interior side yard. It's difficult to say from my perspective. I would argue that because of the alteration, the location of the driveway, I would say that significant soil disturbance has already occurred.
So Sarah, with knowing what we know about the way these things can get complicated, would that not be something that would be sort of a primary concern before they get into something and then have Curve Lake actually shut them down?
Thank you through you, Madam Mayor. We do have on the decisions that should they start excavating and discover archaeological remains, that they do contact Curve Lake. As for this property, I mean, I don't know if there's an option for me to be able to share the screen here to show pictures of what the lot looked like, but I mean, the driveway runs right through where their proposed build is, and that garden is, like I said, right there. So it's difficult to go against Chris's recommendations.
I, for one, would like to have an official opinion on that. I'm not comfortable proceeding if we don't know for sure whether our planning consultants are advising that we should or should not have an archaeological assessment. I think we need that
I
expert
think they need it.
input.
Anybody else here?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would rather err on caution
Yeah.
and have the archaeological report as one of the conditions,
Yep, me too.
rather than to
Find out later on
find
after a
out
lot of
later
money's been
on
spent.
that, especially in that area.
Yes.
Through you, Madam Mayor, typically, Chris Jones would identify in his report if there is a requirement for an archaeological assessment. They agree with Sarah's interpretation that Chris has identified a lot of disturbance on the property, but it's certainly council's prerogative to request that archaeological assessment, and you can include that as a condition. I'd also like to add, with the discrepancy with the applicant's agent talking about the roof over the lake facing deck patio, I think that we should go back and see if we can come up with some sort of compromise, because it doesn't meet the definition of deck and patio as Chris has identified in his report. And I don't want this to set a precedent in the future as we go forward. So if we could pare it back a little bit, I know that there are some bases in terms of the structure. The roof structure is considered lot coverage as well. And because he's looking at reducing it to 20%, I think we need to go back and look at that before we bring forward a zoning bylaw amendment for council's consideration. We'll
Good.
prepare a short report with those details in it.
I think you'll get your council
I'd like to make a motion to defer to our next meeting.
or defer it for these two reports to come back
Yeah, exactly.
so that we know what
Yep.
we're deferring to.
Yep.
So as you mentioned, defer to answers to those two. Okay, seconder to that?
I would support that.
Okay.
It's the archaeological assessment and
Modification.
compromise about the covered porch.
Yeah, modification. Okay, all in favor? That's carried. And the second one, please, Sarah.
Thank you through you, Madam Mayor. There was a public meeting held for file number 22-24. At this time, staff recommending that council receives the report from the external planning consultant, Chris Jones, and defer approval of the zoning bylaw amendment pending delivery of the registered reference plan. Thank you.
Now, is that something that would be commonly asked for at this stage?
Through you, Madam Mayor. Yes, the registered reference plan is what needs to be included on the zoning bylaw amendment in order for it to be registered.
So that's the only thing that's holding this up?
Yes.
All right, other comments? Councillor Francis?
I'd just like to make a motion to receive the report and defer approval of the zoning amendment pending delivery of the registered reference plan.
Okay, seconder? Councillor Armstrong, Ed, all in favor? Motion has carried. Zoning amendment for 22-24. That's the one we just did?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, presentations from Ed Ingram, General Manager of MicroAge, and Donna Taggart, CIO Treasurer, regarding IT Managed Services Agreement.
Who's here?
Did you let me know?
Calling all Eds, calling all Eds. Donna, do you want to take this over before?
Sure. Yeah. Thank you. Through you. Hopefully Ed comes on shortly here. We just wanted to give you a status update on the implementation of the new IT structure that was included in the 2022 budget. So I'm happy to say almost everything is complete at this time. We did receive a new service agreement from MicroAge, and that was promised. We had a temporary one until this project was complete. And there is an increase in the annual amount to $53,040 from our anticipated $29,000.
Oh, God.
That increase is due to an increase in the number of devices that we have, and that relates solely to the fact that we had to buy a bunch of laptops for staff to be able to work from home through the pandemic. So we have had good discussions with MicroAge to reduce those costs, and we're going to look at replacing current desktops that are on the list for replacement. The current useful life is 5 years for those. With laptops only, and staff would have the one device and carry it back and forth as required. So yes, the annual amount was more than we had anticipated, and that will result in an additional $2,000 a month for September, October, November, and December. But we do believe at this time we can accommodate that additional budget amount through some underspending, and if required, we could come back for a reserve amount to come from the general government reserve, should that be required in the future. But yes, Ed was here today just to speak about the project and the successes we've been able to implement with that.
Donna, would there not have been any funding through for supporting people at home, like additional costs for setting people up? Because if these computers have been necessary in order to fulfill the demands of COVID, there isn't any emergency funding there to apply for to cover that?
Right, so thank you, and through you. The money for this project is coming from the service delivery reserve. The only amount from the operating budget is the amount that's the support for MicroAge, which isn't considered a capital initiative. So typically, there isn't funding that I'm aware of for your ongoing support for IT services.
So even though those IT services are required because of health, whatever, there's no government subsidy for that.
Right, so through you, they are required most definitely, and they have been, we did have an amount in the budget already for those, but we do recognize that it's an appropriate use of the service delivery money because that money was given by the province to implement increased service standards, and we used it for that project, and it, it was a costly initiative.
Okay. Carol?
Yeah, thank you, through Madam Mayor. So Donna, if we retire some of those desktops earlier, because presumably those people already have a laptop, could we not save some money? In other words, reduce the number of total devices as quickly as possible, so that we don't have as many devices under this contract, and have the contract reflect that there may be some savings as we reduce the number of devices.
Right. So thank you, and through you. Yes, we've had some good discussions in that regard that we will look to do that. There are systems we're not able to do that on, in particular ones that require access to our CIBC financial software, that type of thing. We need desktops for, so where appropriate, we can, yes, we can most definitely do that. We can look to do it sooner. We have a really good replacement schedule for computers, but yeah, we just need the ability for staff to, it takes dual approvals, and if people aren't here, we need something here for approvals for banking.
And can we make the contract flexible enough so that as we eliminate devices, the costs will come down in the current year?
Yes, so thank you, and through you. Is that on, Ed's on there. So we have had good discussions that they are willing to do that at any time. So, but Ed is now on there, so he can elaborate on that.
Now, does that also cover the firewall protection for hackers and things?
Yes.
So that's
you,
in
yes.
that. Now, do they feel, and maybe this is probably a dumb question, but do they feel that they can keep up with the hackers, or the hackers winning?
So through you, Ed is on there now, and he can speak to hackers better.
Okay. We're hacking into you, Ed.
There, I'm off mute. Hello, everybody. So Mayor Clarkson, yes, absolutely. So, as long as we keep things up and into place, we should be able to stay ahead of those hackers. However, I do have to tell you that there is never a 100% guarantee on anything at any point in time. You can't 100% guarantee. What you need to do is put up those multiple doors that are locked to keep them locked and try to keep the people out as best as you possibly can. But you are in a great place to actually keep that and make that happen.
So Ed, when people have their electronic devices that they're working from home, and they're also working from here, how many times do the home ones get crossed over, which then leaves you much more vulnerable? Because like once you've got a device, does it cover everything that comes in, or does it cover what comes in through the business end of it? Like if you're using, like for instance, my computer at home, I have Trent chip on it, and I also have my own personal stuff on it.
Mm-hmm.
Does that firewall cover both, or how vulnerable are you to using one device for two different offerings?
Yeah, anytime that you're talking about using a device for personal items, the chances of you getting improvised or malware or anything else is actually greater, because you're going to different places outside of business class places which already have that security. However, all the machines that are out there right now, I know I heard you guys talking about the laptops and the desktops and having two of those, but any of the municipality-owned equipment has our protection on them. So if they do VPN over, they're taking over the protection of your environment currently right now through the firewall. So, and also they do have our endpoint detection on them, and they also do have our MDR on them, which is kind of like the hunter. It's constantly looking for bad guys trying to get in. And they're also encrypted as well. So your security is there. There really isn't much more you can do to keep yourself safe, besides not using the internet. You know, that's always an option, but you'll never get anything done. So you do have that protection. For your personal systems that you're just getting email for through the Municipality of Trent Lakes, the protection now that you have is Office 365, and we have a security stack protection on top of that as well. So you're going to be secure in that manner. So to easily answer your question, if you're using a system for personal and work, there is a higher chance, there's a higher chance of being compromised.
What does MDR mean?
Sorry, MDR is Managed Detection and Response. EDR means Endpoint Detection and Response. So if you know a little bit about history, I view it as being a hunter and a gatherer. So your EDR is a gatherer. It's waiting for things to come in that it can catch and stop. The MDR is a hunter. It's hunting your network and looking for little holes or little places that people can try to get into and advising us that it is open. So you have both of those protections on all your systems that are connected to the municipality right
Oh, I may never leave home without it.
now. Absolutely. And to quickly answer your question, Councillor Armstrong, absolutely. So we are more than happy, and we talked to Donna, and we have made the suggestion that if you could limit yourself just to laptops, which I recommend, then we can, as soon as you eliminate the desktops, then we can cut those back from the contract, and it's just a 30-day cycle. So we bill contracts at the beginning of the month. So then if we stop that and take that away for the next billing cycle, then we'll take that out of that billing cycle. So as many as you guys can reduce over time, we will reduce it off the contract at the same time.
Perfect, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for that, Ed. And if I could suggest that we have an accelerated program to do exactly that.
Sure.
I think that would be in our best interest because we're looking at a fairly steep increase year over year. And if there's an opportunity to reduce it by the number of devices, that's an easy, low hanging fruit, because certainly, we don't want to dismiss or not continue with the kinds of security service programs we have. And I think you've done a good job with that. So to me, the easy hit here is get rid of the PCs where we can.
Yeah, and I'd love to say that we can take it off the PCs, but if you have something connected to the network, it needs a security period. So as long as we can take them off, we can reduce that cost. Easy enough, no problems.
Okay. Thank you.
Donna, any other comments? You okay? All right, thank you, sir. Anybody else on council? Any more? Bessie, you're okay?
I'm sorry, did you guys want to run through everything that you've done and that is completed?
I think that would be helpful to hear.
Do you have 3 minutes?
You've prepared it, I think.
Yeah, it won't take too long. It won't take too long at all. So as you know that as you see here, that we've replaced the server. We've done all the standard security server hardenings. So there's a lot of things inside the server that you need to tighten up and harden and everything as well. We've got that all done. The data is encrypted on your server. The only place that we couldn't encrypt it was on the Keystone itself because the program would not allow that to happen. And that's fine. We were aware of that. That's why we said some applications may not support it, and that's completely fine. We monitor the health of the server, and we got the patches and updates, the endpoint detection that we just talked about, as well as the managed detection and response that we've talked about as well. That's running on your server. It's done and complete. Your backup and business continuance device being the Dado, it is in place. It is working well. It's done and complete. And that is more so, it's a backup. It can get very granular to get your data back, but it also is a business continuance device. So if the server was to have a major outage, we'd be able to spin up those servers on this device and keep you working. So there's about a half-hour delay, estimated around 30 minutes to do that. And if for some reason there was a fire or flood, knock on wood, then it takes us a couple hours to spin everything up in the cloud. And since you actually have laptops opposed to desktops, you'll be able to connect to your servers remotely from wherever you have an internet connection. So that is a business continuance device that's perfect. The one thing that really saved grace, especially when it comes to cyber insurance, is getting the exchange to Office 365. Cyber insurance people do not like Exchange on-prem. It is one of the main places where you can get compromised. Even though you did have safeties and securities in place, it is one of the places that can get compromised. That has been all taken care of. You have all the security stack and security stack and backups in place for your Office 365 as well. So that's all done and secured, including spam filtering and MFA for all global admins for us, which means we have to multi-factor for making any changes for you. So that's all nice and tight. If we scroll down to the firewalls, oops. So Mayor Clarkson, here comes your question. Yes, all your firewalls are up to date. Because you had all your firewalls up to date to begin with, we put that inside of the document that we sent to you, but we're only replacing them as they need to be replaced or updated as they need to be updated. You've put money towards these going forward, so there's no sense on wiping them all out, throwing that money away and putting all brand new ones in when these ones are still perfectly functional. So you will always see, Donna, about 60 days in advance, the quote for what we need to do to the firewalls going forward if they need to be changed. The replacement of the switches, so we have done that. When you're talking about security, the best thing for you to do inside of any environment is to actually separate your networks. And I know that sounds a little bit funny, but you would have your workstations and server on one type of network. You would have your voice over IP on another type of network, your wireless on another, your printers on another. That's called network segregation, even though for you, you see everything working together. But if a hacker was to get through to say on the printers, that would mean there's another locked door in place for him to cut over to the workstations or to the server or any other IoT device. So that's all done and segregated the way it should be. That's perfect. Your workstations that are in there right now, we found one more Windows 7, which was taken care of, but other than that they are off the board. You're all Windows 10 going forward. All the workstations have been encrypted, which means if they were stolen, lost, there's no way that these people can actually get the data off these systems. All local admin rights have been removed. So we're kind of saving your users from themselves by accidentally, installing something that they shouldn't, that has malware or anything else like that. They have to have admin approval to do anything like that, which is a key part of it all. And all the workstations have your EDR and your MDR installed. We are monitoring them for health. And we also have applied MFA across the board for everybody. They weren't overly happy with that to begin with, but I don't think it was too bad, was it, Donna? There wasn't too many complaints.
No.
The only thing, oh, sorry, Donna?
I said, you're definitely speaking Ron and I's language.
One thing that we have not done yet, but was in the proposal, and we'll talk about that a little bit further going forward, Donna, is an internal and external vulnerability scan. And what those scans do is look for anything, any type of holes that are inside of the network from ethical hackers will do this. Just to see if there's any holes, anything that a human can't see. They use programs to run through. It is rather pricey, but it's something that I do recommend, but it doesn't have to be like, tomorrow or the next day, but I do recommend that we do it. And I believe it was approved. So we just need to actually schedule that to have it done. I would think probably closer to the time that insurance is due again would probably be a great time to do it, or maybe in another, 3 to 4 months once everything is settled, everybody's used to using all the new systems and how it works. We can do that vulnerability scan to make sure that everything is still good and tight. It's like a second set of eyes is really what it is, to make sure that everything is rock solid. Other security things that we supplied, 85% complete, or 95% complete, sorry. So everything, the first top 3 are all about your passwords and a password policy. That's been put into place. So there's complexity. There's how many times you got to change your password. There's if you can use your old password. That is all done and put into place. The phishing training, which is going to be key, that's cybersecurity training for your users. We send out basically false bad emails, and we try to see who clicks on them and see what kind of training they need not to. Those ones are completely fine. They're completely safe. It's coming from us, but it actually gears who actually needs some more training to make sure that doesn't happen. Users don't understand that clicking on one bad email, you're opening up the door to some bad people. And unfortunately, email is probably the most unsecure thing and the most widely used thing used in any type of business environment. So we call it the human firewall. So educating people on what they should and shouldn't do, that's what we call the human firewall. And that we included that inside of the new contract. So that is included with it. And again, of course, all the local admin rights, as we talked about, taken away from all the desktops and laptops. Nobody can do anything without approval. Now, Donna and Bianca, I believe, both have that approval, and they're the only ones that have that approval. Other than that, if they're away, people will call our help desk, and we would look for somebody to approve what they need to do, but we can take care of that ourselves as well. And again, for the MDR, that's across the board. It's across the whole network. It monitors everything and alerts us if anything goes wrong. You also have dark web monitoring that's installed. What that does is it actually scans the dark web and looks for your emails and credentials that might have been stolen from a website or anything else and is for sale on the dark web. If we notice that, we take action on it. And to be honest with you, the biggest action is just rechanging your password again is the biggest action. If there is any personal information stolen in social insurance number, credit card information, that shows us too. That goes on to a little bit more than just changing a password. That's canceling credit cards, contacting the authorities, doing certain things like that. I have yet to see that happen, but we monitor for that as well. And you are fully onboarded right now with all of the securities, the tools that you require for us to fully manage it. So congratulations on all that. I've told Donna before, I really do think that you are the poster child for this security. And I think other municipalities can actually look at what you've done and mimic what you've done to keep themselves safe and secure as well.
And I have a question for you.
Sure.
When Revenue Canada can't keep its site secure, Toronto General Hospital, CIBC banks, if these people can all be hacked, how can you have the confidence in your system being able to avoid that?
That's a very good question. And that's why I actually swing by and say nothing is 100%. All you can do is put your best foot forward. You could spend $1 million on security if you wanted to, and I could never give you 100%. Revenue Canada and the big hospitals and all that other stuff, they are direct targets. Most of their stuff is direct targets with a group of hackers trying to actually get to them. Because they're very large, they become, what's the word I'm looking for? One, they have the money to pay these bad people, but two, it's also, I hate to say it this way, but also kind of like bragging rights for these hacking groups that are out in the industry. So once you're targeted, targeting is harder to stop than anything else. And the chances of actually being targeted are kind of slim unless you're really big. Where you are most vulnerable, I would guess, would be just in the regular day-to-day business stuff. I doubt very much, and I can't give a guarantee that you would actually be targeted for this. But the day-to-day where these hackers don't actually care who you are, what your business is, all they're looking for is to steal your data to sell it or to ransom you for you to pay them. It's only financial. So those bigger places, Mayor Clarkson, like the Targets of the world, the governments of the world, the Microsofts, all those other ones, they have to stay on their toes much more than anybody else because they will be targeted on that.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Anybody else?
I have a pretty simple question. Is I noticed emails that I receive fairly regularly from a ratepayer. All of a sudden it was in junk mail and I didn't notice it for a couple of weeks. So
Oh, okay.
has that anything to do with the new security or?
It probably does, Councillor Friesen. It likely does. So when you get items like that you are completely confident with the sender,
Yeah.
if you just let us know, we can whitelist those to make sure that they come through. It's blocking it because something in the subject line or something is suspicious to the spam filtering. So it's putting it into your junk mail and probably saying spam or something in the header. So yeah, if you're very confident in those and they are going into your junk mail, please let us know. We can open those up.
Okay, great.
Yeah, I'd rather keep it tight and open up what we need to than keep it loose and be of no use to you.
Mhm.
Okay.
Anybody else?
If I may, I'll go ahead and make the motion.
Sure.
There. So the motion is that council receive the report regarding the IT managed services agreement. Further, that council direct the CAO treasurer to sign the services agreement as attached. And I would like to add, and also direct staff to accelerate the plan to retire redundant PCs and replace them with laptops.
Do we have a seconder to that motion? Councillor Franzen, all in favor? Motion is carried. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you, everybody, for your time.
Now, Chelsea Carpenter, Supervisor of Waste Public Works, Pedestrian Crossover Project.
Thank you, Mayor Clarkson, and through you. So before council today is a pedestrian crossover project report for your information. At the May 2021 council meeting, council directed staff to proceed with implementation of 3 pedestrian crossovers in Buckhorn and also approved the funding for the construction of the crossovers from the gas tax reserve. So this report is just identifying additional costs for the project that will be drawn from gas tax funds. If council has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
I have a question. When can we expect these to be erected?
So thank you, and through you. So the line painting should be happening shortly. Maybe Evan can confirm, but hoping possibly this week. It's something that'll take place over the overnight, so it doesn't interfere with traffic. And as for the installation of the sign and the electrical work, we are awaiting an update from the contractor. So they were awaiting locates to come in first, and then they were going to proceed with the work. So we're hoping that will be coming shortly as well. But we have experienced some delays.
Okay, because there's a lot of people saying, where are these? So that's good to know. Anybody else a question on these?
Yeah, just a comment. It seems everything we do is significantly over budget. I mean, we're not talking 10, 15, 20%. We're talking 40% to 60% over budget.
Are these prices starting to come down?
Mhm.
Because a lot of prices, you talk about lumber and gas, there's a lot of things that are coming down. So are some of these overruns, now that they haven't actually been constructed, starting to come back down a bit?
Yeah, through you. Not that we've seen here. I did have some good discussions with some other municipalities. They're finding the same thing. It seems to be something that's happening out there right now. Hopefully that happens, but it seems to be related to inflation and many other factors as well. So we hope it comes down because our budget numbers were appropriate at that time and they just aren't anymore.
So can a group of townships or whatever, can they renegotiate some of these things when the lumber prices, if like a lot of this inflation has been based on lumber. Lumber's down probably what, 30% to what it was in the spring. So these high numbers were when inflation was up there. Now that they're back down, can we renegotiate or do we just have to roll over and say, okay, that's the way it is?
Well, thank you and through you. So at this time, we don't have a project that would be specific to that. And this type of thing would be difficult do that with. It's, it's the cost of getting the electrical and the signs and that type of thing. But, obviously
Yeah.
costing is an issue, and we would love to see the cost come down. That's for sure.
Okay. Anybody else to comment? Dylan, do you want to talk about the bike repairs?
Oh, so if I could just
Oh.
get a motion to receive that report before we move on.
Okay.
Yeah, second.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Windover and Councillor Franzen, all in favor. Thank you. Now, Dylan, you can speak to the bike racks.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. Before you have my report, following up with Council's resolution from the July 12th meeting, where Council supported in principle the donation of bike repair stations and bike racks, and directed staff to prepare a report for Council on legalities and installation. We've consulted with the cattle group, Citizens for Active Transportation in Trent Lakes, with the installation, and we believe now that we are moving out of recreation and facilities busier season, we will be able to fit the installation into our work plan, mainly due to we've found a different style of bike rack that they were originally looking at, switching to one that won't require an in-ground installation, and the repair station will be situated on a prefabricated concrete pad similar to the one that we are, or identical, sorry, to the one that we are doing at Odenang Park. The repair station itself is identical, so our staff will be practiced with that installation as well. And we did I did have a discussion with the municipal solicitor last week, and he believes that this is a relatively low risk endeavor for the municipality, and that with a simple agreement with some indemnification clauses, insurance requirements, and ownership transfer once the group's grant agreement will allow it to happen. He believes that this is a good endeavor for the municipality if we can get that agreement, and I do expect that from him this week, the draft agreement.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Dylan, I was, as were a couple of other people at the, one of the things that they showed there was one of these self-contained washrooms. I don't know whether anybody else took a look at those or not, but they're a unit that are made in Quebec, and they bring them in, they put them on a cement pad. They wash themselves down about once an hour. They are totally self-contained, and they have when they display them, they have a sledgehammer that's pounding away at them all the time. And the sledgehammer doesn't even make a dent on them. But the first place that we saw them was actually up around Sabo Beach. And they've actually installed them up there. They are really fun. So if you look at places like Sandy Beach or the public park in Buckhorn, okay.
Sorry, I'm having some audio issues here. I think I've got a connection issue, but I did gather that you'd like us to look into some of these washrooms. I did get the gist of it, so we can certainly put that as something to look into.
Well, it's really something, because they just, like the way the inside of it is, they're like the doors automatically lock, and then they say open again in 10 minutes, and that gives them time to wash them down. So they've got a system inside, they drain it at the bottom and they're clean. And they've got one at, where do the boats go across, where people go and they look at the sunken boats?
Oh, Tobermory maybe?
Tobermory. They've got one right in the middle of Tobermory, and this is the third year for it. And I talked to one of the caretakers, and they said they've just been absolutely foolproof.
Oh, that definitely sounds very interesting, and might be a good option for us here.
Well, it's worth looking into.
I think we'd want to look into the ones that have solar panels.
Yeah, they has those too.
Yeah.
They're self-contained. The only thing that they lack is a holding tank. If it's a holding tank, you put them on, and electricity, and everything else, they're there. that brings up another subject. I think going forward for the next council, I think all council and a lot of staff should be going to these conventions because this is where all the new stuff is. And I think it's money extremely well spent because there's nowhere else that you can get that kind of information. There were at least, I would say, 3 things there that we could all have learned from. So I think it's money well spent.
Yeah, I'd just like to make a excuse me, council report from the Director of Recreation Facilities regarding the bike racks and repair station. Further, that we approve the donations of them, subject to the signed agreement, and simply to add that we send a note of thanks to Cattle and others for bringing it forward to us.
Okay, thank you.
A seconder to that motion? Deputy Mayor Window? And all in favor? Motion is carried. Fire and emergency services, none. Okay, planning again, please. Consent application. Sarah?
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. On today's agenda, there is a memo written by our external planning consultant, Chris Jones, concerning the council resolution passed on December 21st, 2021 for file numbers B-12521 and B-12621. The resolution read, quote, that council request the applicants of consent file numbers B-12521 and B-12621 to engage in a process to address the question raised about the feasibility of extracting aggregate resources on 130 Ledged Road. It is understood that the applicant has been in communication with the planning department, and staff have advised them that an independent assessment undertaken by a qualified professional is required to address the feasibility issue. In response, it is understood that the applicant has indicated they are either not required to or do not wish to undertake a feasibility assessment. The planning report from Chris Jones is to provide council with advice in the interest of providing the applicant with direction on how to address this matter. Section 2.5.2.5 of the provincial policy statement notes that development on and adjacent to known deposits of mineral aggregate resources shall only be permitted if the resource would not be feasible, the proposed land use or development serves a greater long-term public interest, and issues of public health, safety, and environmental impacts are addressed. The provincial policy statement defines development as, quote, means the creation of a new lot, a change in land use, or the construction of buildings and structures requiring approval under the Planning Act, end quote. This provision of the provincial policy statement is echoed in the Trent Lakes official plan. Section 5.10.7 of the Trent Lakes official plan states in part, quote, development on or adjacent to lands designated aggregate resource extraction on Schedule A1, A2, A3, or identified as mineral aggregate resource on Schedule C, which would preclude or hinder the establishment of new mineral aggregate operations or accesses to these resources shall only be permitted if A, resource would not be feasible, B, the proposed land use or development serves a greater long-term public interest, and C, issues of public health, safety, and environmental impacts are addressed. With regards to the letter submitted by the applicant, I believe it's on corresponds for information on today's agenda. Chris Jones has provided the following comments. 1. Page 3 of the preliminary severance review suggested the owners reach out to the municipality regarding the proposal. The municipality has no record of the applicants reaching out prior to the application's receipt from the County of Peterborough. 2. The rationale in items 1 and 2 may be valid, but this is for an expert to confirm and document in an aggregate study or assessment. Note the 500-meter setback is discretionary based on the word should in section 5.1.21 of the official plan, meaning it can be less, and technical studies have typically justified a lesser setback from sensitive land uses. And 3, the comments in item 3 concerning the haul route are not valid or appropriate to apply to these applications. The applicant cannot presuppose the outcome Dooney Mountain Quarry, nor can they rely on information submitted at a public meeting that has not been verified. In summary, the lands subject to consent application B-125-21 and B-126-21 are located on a deposit of mineral aggregate resources as identified in Aggregate Resource Inventory Paper 105. Schedule 2.5.2.5 of the Provincial Policy Statement defines development to include lot creation and requires development proposed in or adjacent to known mineral aggregate resources to be justified on the basis of specific criteria. The Provincial Policy Statement defines a deposit of mineral aggregate resources as an area of mineral aggregate resources as delineated in the Aggregate Resources Inventory Papers. The lands subject to consent applications B-125-21 and B-126-21 are located in the limestone bedrock resource as identified on Schedule C to the official plan. Section 5.10.7 of the Trent Lakes official plan mirrors Section 2.5.2.5 of the Provincial Policy Statement. 7 recent consent applications in the municipality of Trent Lakes have been required to prepare an aggregate study or feasibility assessment to address Section 2.5.2.5 of the Provincial Policy Statement and Section 5.10.7 of the Trent Lakes official plan. In order to be consistent with the Provincial Policy Statement and conform with the Trent Lakes official plan, consent applications B-125-21 and B-126-21 require an assessment prepared by a qualified professional to address Section 2.5.2.5 of the Provincial Policy Statement and Section 5.10.7 of the official plan. Not requiring the applicant to undertake this study would set a dangerous precedent. The recommendations in the report from the external planning consultant are as follows. 1, that council receive the report from the external planning consultant, Chris Jones. And 2, stipulate that a condition in the MAF for consent applications B-125-21 and B-126-21 that requires the preparation of an assessment by a qualified professional to address sections 2.5.2.5 of the Provincial Policy Statement and section 5.10.7 of the Trent Lakes official plan. Thank you, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Yes.
Yep, through you, Deputy Mayor. Sarah or Chris, if he's on the line, how much would an assessment, an aggregate assessment cost?
Through you, I can't answer that question. It would depend on the external agency hired.
Are we talking 10,000, 1,000, 20,000 ballpark?
Through you, again, I'm not certain.
Does Chris know?
A comment. I'm really struggling with this one. This is in an area, I mean, I think the applicant has made some strong points about why it's not feasible to extract aggregate from this area and get it to market.
Yeah.
And I mean, common sense, I think, says, no, you're not going to have an aggregate operation there. Added to the fact that we approved a building permit for this individual on one of his severed lots. So he's going ahead and building in the same area.
Through you, building permits do not go through the growth plan or the provincial policy statement. That's a planning act situation as outlined in my memorandum.
Okay, no, thanks for that, Sarah, although I don't understand why we could approve somebody building on an aggregate field if we have to have a professional come in and assess it if they want to sever it. That makes no sense to me.
Through you, those are lots of record. Building permits get issued on lots of record. This is a matter of creating a brand new lot of record to be built upon.
Okay, no, thank you for it's a good technical response. I'm still struggling with the requirement to have this individual spend money to have a professional come in, do an aggregate study and prove what he has already stated in his letter, that it is not feasible to extract aggregate from that area. On top, I mean, there's some other issues with this application, two of which may be, and I have not confirmed this, that the applicant was not even told that his file would be on this council agenda or a previous council agenda. So I am very reluctant to proceed and require them to have to perform an aggregate assessment at this stage.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, we've had that with archaeological studies where somebody's building on a bald rock and we say they don't need it because there's obviously no native artifacts there. So I think there have to be exceptions. When we look at this property, he could have built a garage on that piece of property without a problem. It's only because he's applying for a severance.
Any comment? Yes, sir.
Through you, Deputy Mayor Wendover. As Sarah had mentioned, that's an issue. If someone has an existing lot of record,
Yeah.
they are able to go to the building department if they don't need any planning approvals. It's when you need the planning approvals that the growth plan, provincial policy statement, and our official plan and zoning bylaw obviously would kick in. So we've asked 7 other applications that Sarah mentioned to you that have gone through some sort of planning approval, severances to be exact, that we required an assessment done of the aggregate. So as she mentioned, it is kind of a difficult situation and a dangerous precedent that you're going to have other individuals asking for the same thing, and we're not the professional aggregate individuals that are providing opinions, and I don't believe that council has the ability to do that either. So that's why we asked for these. And as Sarah mentioned, the cost, I don't know what a cost would be, but there are scoped assessments that are done which are of lesser value. So if someone could shop around and talk to a consultant that's doing an assessment, there are different prices, I guess, from various consultants that would be providing the service, but would be a scope. It could be a letter. It doesn't have to be a full-blown report based on what these individuals, the property owners, are advising council and staff.
Okay. So any motion to make, or? What do we want to do?
But I can't support anything other than a minimal letter from a professional. I mean, if we need to check a box per all the regulations, it sounds like we need to, and not set a precedent. But I don't want to put an onerous burden on this individual where every indication is that it's just not feasible to extract aggregate from there. If I had a ballpark estimate, I'd feel more comfortable.
Do they have an aggregate permit, like to this guy?
No, it's just on Schedule C. of the-
Schedule C.
Yeah.
Schedule C that council passed several years ago, which was probably a mistake.
Yes, Del?
Through Deputy Mayor Wendover, we can call it a scoped assessment, aggregate assessment, and we certainly will work with the property owner and the consultant that they hired to indicate what we're looking for, not a full-blown report. If it could be done in a letter from the consultant, we're just looking for a professional to provide that information to the municipality to satisfy that condition.
I'd be willing to make that motion. That motion. that we receive the report and then we require a scope from a licensed professional aggregate person.
Second that, Carol?
In the form of a letter,
In the
As
form of
amended?
a letter.
then yes, I would second that.
Okay. Good enough. Vote, are you in favor?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, pass. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right?
Yeah,
So I say.
Yeah.
500 yards.
that's a long ways, 1,500 feet or so.
Okay, so now we're moving on to places of occupancy. Barbara?
Good afternoon, Madam Mayor, members of council. The long-awaited license of occupation policy is before you. We've spent a significant amount of time researching this, writing this, rewriting this, vetting it through a lot of different sources. So I am going, just for the benefit of possible outside public on the meeting, I am going to read a few sections from our report, but I'm not going to go through it all because I'm sure that you've read it. And then I'm going to speak to some specific parts in the policy. So I bring before council the amended license of occupation policy number 5.34 for discussion and approval of the policy. This draft policy will provide a very clear direction of when a license of occupation will and will not be considered, the process to obtain the license of occupation, and the circumstances in which the license could be revoked. This policy also provides for the protection of the municipality for use of the municipally owned lands through a license and insurance requirements. License of occupation is another example of a topic that is challenging to write a policy to meet all of the needs of the associated parties, including the property owners adjacent to the municipally owned lands that terminate at or are adjacent to a water body. That seems fair and reasonable to one party is not always the same for another party involved at the same location. When reviewing the policy, all aspects are to be taken into consideration, including the ability to enforce the policy through staffing levels, the ability to provide clear policies for the public to understand and respect, and the ability to protect the municipality from liability. In the past, there have been some emotionally charged situations that have resulted in attendance by the police department as well as municipal staff to address disputes. Anyone has the right to use and travel upon an unopened road allowance, including shoreline road allowances, but it does not give them the right to install a dock encroachment on public lands without approvals from the municipality, nor does it give the right to anyone using these lands to be disrespectful of adjacent property owners. When setting policy, first and foremost, the interest and liability protection must be built into the policy. To mitigate liability, very strict policy language has been incorporated when considering applications, which may result in very few agreements actually being granted. And I'm going to remind that being granted a license of occupation for the installation of a dock is a privilege, not a right. And as such, those that receive them need to be respectful of the lands they are being given permission to use, as well as any abutting landowners. So when I was working through this policy, a number of things were going through my mind. First and foremost, protection of liability for the municipality. So the insurance requirements have been increased as per the solicitor, and I will touch on that a little bit later. But I do want to clarify the scope of the policy.
The scope of the policy shall apply to all lands within the limits of the corporation and the municipality of Trent Lakes. With regards to shoreline road allowances, this policy will only apply to shoreline road allowances located in front of municipal or crown-owned lands. So what I want to clarify there is we have miles and miles of shoreline road allowances that are in front of private properties. This policy will not be addressing those areas. It's just a very small amount of shoreline that's adjacent to publicly owned lands. Those shoreline road allowances are typically caught during planning applications and building permit processes. So when I spent a significant amount of time reading the case law of Glasspool versus North Kawartha, which is a very precedent-setting case identifying that zoning does apply over Crown-owned lands, which include water. So I did, under purpose, include water above Crown-owned lands. That particular court case was more about a boathouse that was built over water, but it's the same principle. Definitions, I included a few more definitions to be really clear. Definitions are really helpful when you're trying to explain things to the public and when you're putting together documentation, specifically the agreement, we can incorporate some of these definitions to be consistent. The definition of dock is that the dock must be connected to the shore and it may have a fixed foundation or be cantilevered over the water, which means it's just connected to the shoreline, but it can either just float on the water or it could have some legs that go down into the water. But a dock does not include a floating dock. And this was put in because people were trying to circumvent the purpose of the policy by thinking that they were just going to put a floating dock out in the water and get around having to get a license. And this policy is more about just getting the dock in the water. It's where are people parking? There's a lot of components to this thing that we're going to be addressing through the application to make sure that everything's being followed correctly. People are not being affected by us issuing a license, which would include parking areas. So under section 5.21, there are items A to S, which are clear items where encroachments will not be permitted. The four that jump off the page, they're the most important out of they're all important, but the ones that I was really feel we will be applying mostly to the applications will be that they will not be permitted where the encroachment creates an unsafe condition or poses a danger to the public. The encroachment diminishes the public's right and usage of the municipally owned lands. And C is probably the one that we've had to deal with in the past, which has prompted some of the language in this agreement, where more than one application has been received for the same location for road allowances leading directly to the body of water or shoreline road allowances. Areas where more than one dock encroachment could be accommodated may be considered. The latter may only be considered on lands large enough to support more than one dock encroachment on municipally owned lands, which will be determined by staff. So the one that comes to mind when I'm stating that last sentence is there is an area on Beaver Lake Road, Bridge 1, where there are a number of docks there. That's an example that we might consider that. If we do receive two applications for one location, nobody gets anything. The municipality can't be in a position where we're going to be picking between parties because each person's going to have their own reasons why they feel they should be given the agreement. This is a topic I discussed with Mr. Ewart extensively, and this is a pretty common element in other license of occupation policies in the province. And P, I mentioned the floating docks would not be considered. Q, the applicant does not own the lands adjacent to the municipal shoreline road allowance. This was just carried forward from the last policy. So you need to be in the area. You need to be significant to that area where you're asking to have the encroachment. We don't want people coming from across the municipality. I'm sorry, I have this little box that says it's my connection. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. It says that I don't have a strong connection. We don't want people coming from the other side of the municipality and asking for a dock on the other municipality. It's got to be within the vicinity of where you are. Section 5.3 is other considerations that may be considered, and this is the area where I worked in if it's applicable to have some approval from Conservation, Trent Severn Waterway, MNRF as part of the application. Section 541, 542, and 5.5, this is all about the application process, what is going to be accepted as the application, how it's going to be vetted. I've built in language so that if it doesn't meet the criteria, council doesn't even see it. It's denied, and the application and the letter goes back to the owner advising why it's been denied. If it gets through the application process where it meets all the requirements, then a report will be created for council to review and approve to enter into the agreement. We did make a change with the length of the agreement. It used to be 10 years. We switched it from 10 to 5. 10 is a long time to be locked into an agreement. Things change quickly, as we know, environmentally and planning wise, and as well, property owners change often, even though there is another section built into the policy that if the property does change hands, the right to maintain the encroachment does not go with the sale of the land. It's just a double protection there. Insurance requirements. Mr. Ewart suggested that we up it from 2 million to 5 million. He stated that the difference between the two is not cost prohibitive. It's fairly insignificant. And when we have people using municipal lands, the municipality needs to put the most protection in place for themselves. Section 511 lays out the reasons why the license may be revoked. And this comes down to behavior. And the municipality, we are busy, the staff is busy, council is busy. The last thing we want to be doing is be in the middle of battles between people. So if there is valid complaints, and they can be proved through evidence, or there's disputes between neighbors, you will lose your license. If you have not paid your renewal fee prior to March 31st of each year, you will lose your license. If you have not provided proof of insurance prior to March 31st, you will lose your license. If for any other reason council sees fit. That's just kind of a catch-all caveat in case some situation comes up that we have to deal with. The next part of the policy goes through if the encroachment is revoked, the revoke process, the notice that we give people to remove their dock. If they don't remove the dock, that we will do it, and that it will stay in place for a certain amount of days. They will be notified of that. And if it's still not collected after a certain amount of days, then the municipality has the right to do with it what they wish. There at the end of this agreement is just a sample agreement. Sorry, at the end of this policy is just a sample agreement. I did work some of the definitions in there. This is, this agreement would be tailored to each individual situation, but this just kind of gives you an idea of what agreement would look like. And the last document that we have attached is we have created a new application form. And this application form is like a working document that would be consistent in the file for the 5-year period once the agreement is issued. And we have an office space at the back where we can track when they have submitted their renewal and when they have submitted their insurance. So I think it's a pretty it's a pretty detailed policy. It's got a lot of safety mechanisms in it. When I was creating it or changing it, adding it to it, I was trying to create a policy that we had safe checkpoints in it, that we can keep people in line and make sure that we have encroachments where we want them to be. And I guess that's the last statement I'll make. I know that it was talked about, do we even want to have encroachments? And I'll be serious, I gave that from some serious thought, but I think that not having a policy in place will just create a situation where people will do what they want out there, and then we're going to be enforcement mode. And I will be honest, we don't have time to be doing that. I'd rather be doing positive things and move forward. If council approves this policy today, the next step will be that I will send the bylaw enforcement officer out. We will be tagging the docks that we find, and we will give them the opportunity to apply for an application.
Are you ready, Barbara, for questions, or
I'm ready.
Peter, you're on?
Yeah, I just have a couple comments. Barb, it's a pretty extensive policy and it's well done. I would like to see this passed with 5 members of council. And I would also like to give the public some time to comment on this policy. So I'm asking that it be deferred for 2 weeks.
I won't be here in 2 weeks. So we still don't have 5.
Okay. I can't control that.
No.
But I would like to give I've had a little bit of pushback. So I would like to give those individuals a chance to comment if they wish to comment. And if they wish not to comment, then I would be supportive of this motion.
Councillor Armstrong.
Yeah, I would take a little different perspective on this. This has been in the works for 2 years. This was an issue that was brought up to me when I was campaigning in 2018. It's especially an issue in the Cavendish area, not so much in Harvey and perhaps not at all in Galway, but it has been a serious issue for lots of areas and neighbors in the Cavendish area. There has already been a lot of conversation with individuals who are affected by this, as well as those who have placed their docks there. So I personally think there's been sufficient time and a lot of research that has gone into this policy. So I would instead like to make a motion that we receive it and approve it for implementation.
Okay, so we have 2 motions on the floor here, so let's vote on.
No,
We need a second.
you only have 1 motion. I just suggested that we
So you're
defer
not
it
making
to
a
our
motion?
next meeting. I'm not making a motion.
Okay, so then do we have a seconder for Carol's motion?
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor? Motion is carried. I'm curious, just curious. Why do more people not buy their shoreline allowance?
If I may, Madam Mayor, I think we've moved past this
No, I'm
topic.
just curious.
I understand, but not sure we should have any further discussion on this now that we've voted and moving on.
Well, I don't know that one's related to the other to start with.
That's exactly right.
Well, that brings up another subject. Anyway, I will ask you that. So application for flood hazard mapping.
Thank you, and through you, Mayor Clarkson. Planning staff have initially spoken with Kawartha Region Conservation Authority this past spring regarding a potential funding opportunity under the Federal Flood Hazard Identification Mapping Program. This past Thursday, KRCA reached out advising of the funding application deadline of September 16th. Under this program, it is a 50-50 split with municipal dollars matched by federal funding. Staff are suggesting the flood hazard mapping for the Nisswa, Zibi River, and Nogies Creek. This mapping would go a long way in assisting the public and staff with development applications. Staff require a council resolution in support to accompany the grant application. Therefore, it's being recommended that council receive the flood hazard mapping report, and further that council provide support for the municipality to apply for funding under the federal flood hazard identification mapping program in collaboration with 4th Region Conservation Authority, and further that any budget amounts required under this program be included in the future 2023 and 2024 budgets.
Okay, I want to comment on this one. I'm concerned that if this takes place, that it might have really adverse insurance implications for people who live there. Like right now, you know, the insurance company doesn't come along and rate you based on something like this. But there isn't probably a property along there that isn't going to be impacted by this. So flood insurance might become very, very, very difficult to get their hands on. Yes.
Through you, Madam Mayor. The difficulty is when we are reviewing planning applications, we require individuals to do their own flood assessment mapping, right? So they are hiring a consultant. They don't understand that they can't be in the floodplain, and there are certain requirements under the building code when the chief building official deals with applications as well. So I think this mapping, if we were to have it for the municipality, for staff to use, and for the public to understand, it is a hazard to be in a floodline area. So for flood prone lands. So the mapping would assist us greatly in order to communicate this with the public.
Well, I can see where it can assist staff, but probably knowing that area as well as most of us do, 90% of that land down there is already occupied. So they're going to come under that rush with being in a floodplain without ever having, like right now, the insurance companies don't come along and say, are you in a floodplain? But if that mapping were to take, and it would take almost all of that area and put them into that floodplain, I would think it would have very, very serious implications on whether they can be buy insurance once they're in there. So I think what is going to benefit here, I think the risk is really substantial for the people who already live there.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'm not quite sure that individuals that currently own their properties, it's anybody who wants to go and redevelop their property that we're concerned about.
That's what you're concerned about. But the mapping is going to map the entire area. It isn't going to say, well, this one's been here for 40 years and that one's been here for 25 years. The mapping is going to go on the land, right?
Madam Mayor, that's correct. And with the mapping in place, I educate the public in terms of where their dwellings are located within that area. We do have zoning mapping that does show environmental protection along the creek and along the river as well. So if anybody's looking at the zoning of their property, they'll see that they're in an EP zone. So this is just another level of more detail in terms of redevelopment of properties.
Well, I think it would be interesting to speak to a couple of the insurance companies to find out just what the impact would be. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think that's a good point. I support this because I think it's you know, these days of climate change, I think we need to be proactive in identifying areas of risk. However, my concern is a little different. We're basically committing monies in 2023 and 24. If we get the grant, we'll be obliged to go forward. And so from a financial perspective, I just don't get how we can be pre-committing that money. I'd feel a little bit better, again, if I knew ballpark, how much are we talking about? So perhaps you can answer that question. And also, you know, maybe to you, Donna, this idea of pre-committing the money. So if we apply for the grant and we get it, then I think we're obliged to carry it out, but it's up to future councils to decide whether or not to budget for it. So there's a little catch-22 in here that I'm not understanding.
Through you, Madam Mayor, I had the same concerns, and then talking with the Ortha Conservation Authority, they indicated that we can go with one of the projects, either being the river, or we can go with the creek, or apply for two, but there's no commitment. If we find that the cost is too expensive, and an indication could be up towards $100,000, so 50-50, that would be 50,000. And it could be distributed over a 2-year period. So you could do 25,000 in 2023 and 25 in 2024. But there is no commitment by council. It's just that we're asking for a resolution that we apply for the funding, but we're not committed.
Councillor Branson.
Yeah, is there a time element to this, Adele? Could this be dealt with incoming council, because we only have 2 meetings after this one before the election?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that would be the idea, because we have to apply for the funding, but there is no commitment from council to proceed. If we were successful in getting the funding, the new council could decide whether they wish to put that money in that budget for 2023.
Well, as lame duck, we can't commit any money now anyway.
No.
Councillor Armstrong?
Yeah, thank you. Just to follow that question, what's the window within which that grant application has to be submitted? Because I think a part of Councillor Branson's question is, will the window still be open for applications once the new council is seated? And then they would have the opportunity to make that determination.
Through you, Madam Mayor, the deadline is September 16th.
Okay.
And it was only brought up last Thursday. So that's why it just landed on the council agenda with not much detail in terms of cost. The staff at the Ortha Conservation were going to be providing that information to me, but yet to be received.
I just wanted to respond to the mayor's comment about insurance. I believe insurance reacts to places that have previously been flooded. I don't know if they react to floodplains. That was my understanding, especially on the Burnt River, which I had some experience with that. And they even had to, when they sold their places, it had to be in the listing that it had been flooded in, let's say 1978, for an example. So future buyers were aware that they were in a floodplain.
I think the implications of an actual designation on insurance should be investigated, because people who don't live on the water have no idea how restrictive it's getting. You know, if you've got, say, a fuel tank anymore, you've got to pretty much get rid of that. If you're not on commercial gas or whatever, like more and more, the implications of people who are on waterfront, whether it's wells or whatever it is restrictive. So I would certainly be, I would not vote for this in any way, shape, or form until the insurance companies are contacted to see if, in fact, if you're on a floodplain, it does impact the insurance that you're able to get. I was talking to somebody yesterday about insurance, and they said, you know what, you've got to be careful with insurance. It's not the fact that you've got it, but will it cover me for this if I have a problem?
Yeah.
So I think it's very, very important to contact a couple of insurance companies, because it's hard enough on lakeshore property to get insurance now anyway, without adding another level of restriction. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. To follow up on the mayor's comments, you need a decision today, obviously, because otherwise we'll miss the window. Would you be comfortable with a motion? I'm testing this first. That says we approve it or support you proceeding only if you've identified from 2 or 3 insurance companies that there will be no impact on existing resident policies. Would that address your concern? I think it does.
Yeah, I would go along with that.
then I will,
Especially people who insure people in those areas. And you have people who work here, who live on those roads, get them to check their insurance company.
Yeah.
And say, if this happened, would I still be insured in the event of a flood?
I'm getting right this moment, I'm getting permits, okay, for putting septic systems in a floodplain. Okay, and there's, the whole thing's a floodplain. I mean, I'll be honest with you, there's a dozen cottages there and they're all in the floodplain. No, this is not in our municipality, this is in Selwyn, but still, I don't know like how that works if you like, I'm dealing with Orca, you know, and they say, well, here, this has got to be above the floodplain. But the cottage is in the floodplain.
But that's a
But
different,
the septic, you got to, you know what I mean? But it's already a floodplain. It's designated a floodplain.
but then you don't
I'm
know,
Orca.
but you don't know what their insurance situation says if the building were flooded.
Oh, yeah, no.
And that's, I think that's the concern here.
I'm just saying, I know that there's a lot of stuff in floodplains. There's no question about that. But I don't know whether what we're saying, whether they're designated as far as the municipality goes as a floodplain, you know what I mean? But Orca certainly designates as a floodplain. I'm just trying to, make that point, that's all. So I don't know
What their
whether the
insurance,
insurance company's asked if you're in a floodplain or not, you know what I mean?
you have to have a flood to find out.
Yeah,
Anyway, I think your motion covers it.
does it, if that's the case,
Yeah,
then I
sure,
would
yeah.
make that as a motion.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry,
Jesse?
Jesse.
Perhaps I could just, based on the discussion, suggest a slight amendment that the final that be amended to say that any budget amounts required under this program be brought forward to new council for potential inclusion in the 2023-2024 budgets.
As an add-on to what I said.
Yep.
Yep, I'd be fine with that.
So we still have the questions to the insurance companies as to whether or not that'll
Yeah.
impact it.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
saying support it only if. So that,
Yeah, no,
Something doesn't happen down the line and it's
Yeah.
like,
Through you, Madam Mayor, I'd be happy to look at the council's questions.
thank you. Thank you. Okay, so we've got that motion carried.
No.
Yeah,
I'll
okay.
take the
You
motion.
got seconded?
Yeah.
And all in favor?
yeah, okay.
That's, okay, budget timetable. Ooh. Go ahead, Donna.
Thank you, through you.
We've just spent all your money today.
Yeah. Yeah. So yes, just for your information, the timetable for the 2023 budget. Department head staff have been given their individual working budgets. They are working on those. They're due by the end of September. And we will be putting out a portal for public feedback in order to ensure that we receive that. So the schedule is just for your information.
Okay,
And any comments I'm willing to consider for sure.
I think this is just bookkeeping, so we need a motion to approve this. Counselor Francis and Counselor Armstrong, all in favor? Okay, electronic sign purchase.
Thank you, through you. In keeping with insufficient budget funds, the sign that we budgeted $20,000 for this property out front, the electronic sign, appears to be about half of what is required. There is a requirement to actually hook into the fire department Station 4's panel as part of this project as well. But I do have Dylan on here as well, and he can speak to specifics should you have any questions. So I'm just looking for additional funding. This project was being paid for from the service delivery reserve, so it won't impact the tax levy. But once again, it is coming in over budget. So looking for approval to take more monies out of that fund.
A motion to approve.
And I'm going to make a comment before we get a seconder. I guess we get a seconder before we have a comment anyway.
You can comment.
Is this the best place to get the biggest bang for your buck from electronic sign? Like how much traffic goes by here that can be used to send people, say, up north or send wherever you want to send them? Like these electronic signs are fantastic if they're in the right place. They're expensive to do, and they can send people, like for instance, the Kinmount Fair last week. this sign really probably wouldn't have impacted them nearly as much as if that sign had been down in the Buckhorn area. Like that's where the bulk of the tourism and everything else is. So not to say an electronic sign shouldn't be down there, but if you had to choose a place and you've got a tourist information center that's as active as that one is, would that not be a more logical place to put an electronic sign? Yes.
I don't know if Kim Alper would be a good example because I think a lot of people drive by here that would.
That's maybe not, I was thinking that because they put the signs on there.
Yeah, no, but I'm just saying
Yeah, no,
that
that probably wasn't a good
anything
example.
that would be within that area of our municipality would be better served here than it would be.
Yeah,
in
no, I
Buckhorn.
wasn't thinking, what made me think of that is that's the first time I've seen them put signs down there.
Yeah.
So the Kinmount Fair had signs in Buckhorn.
Yeah.
You go first.
Through you. This location was selected. I'm not saying there aren't other locations would be a good idea as well, but there's often information put out on this sign for people, and it's an opportunity to use an existing sign and just add to it. So it was just, you know, there are often, and you've probably seen them out there, signs put out about different events for our, you know, our fire department, that type of thing, our waste. They're usually put here, but we can look at other sites in the future as well.
Well, if the work has been done on that, it's, I certainly wouldn't, I wouldn't want to change it at this point. I just think that at some point we are missing the boat by not having a sign in the Buckhorn area that would push people all over the place because it is so busy. Yes.
Just that the BCC is planning on putting up a very similar sign. So I'm sure they would be advertising events that would be in the Buckhorn area.
Again, it would have been better coming into town, but not my choice. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Without a second for Councillor Franzen's motion, I would like to make a motion to receive it and not approve it. It's a hard line, but we have already approved a number of things that are over budget. I know we have reserves we can use for it. This is not essential. It's a nice to have. I supported it when we first put it in the budget, but somewhere along the line, we have to draw the line on over budget items. And so I think this is something that we can say, you know, good idea, look at it in the future. We're not going to double the budget on this so that we can get it in place this year because we don't need it. It's a nice to have.
I think with the inability that this township has to disperse information, I think it is necessary.
Yep.
And
Yeah,
whether or not at some point we add another one somewhere else, but there is so much information that if you talk to the general public out of this area, they know nothing whatsoever about what's going on. If you want to do cost recovery, there's one in Bridge North, and one person out there believed in it so strongly that he paid for it himself. And they actually rent space off it. And it paid for itself in 2 years. And they don't rent, you know, they rent public events. Anybody that wants to do, doesn't matter what it is. It could be Bridge Empire Fuels who have a special on. It can be anybody. And with this rotating, that's how they generate the money to keep the thing going. So I think it is necessary. I say I question a little bit, but not enough to stop it from taking place.
Yeah.
I certainly agree that the sign is needed.
Okay, so let's call for a vote.
I need a seconder.
I'll second it.
Okay, sure.
Whatever.
Can we have a recorded vote, please?
Sure.
Are you ready for the vote?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Councillor Armstrong, are you in favor?
No.
Mayor Clarkson?
Yes.
Councillor Franzen?
Yes.
Deputy Mayor Windover?
Yeah.
That's carried.
I also would like to see a cost recovery mechanism put into that for other people that are advertising things. Like they've got one at the Hill on number 7 before you come up out of Marmora. And that's what it does. It advertises it. The roll goes around and advertises this and this and this, plus everything that goes on in the community. And then that rolling sign is where the revenue comes to support it.
You'd need a pretty extensive policy on that to make sure it's fair to everybody.
Oh, if you can pay, it's fair.
Okay.
The policy's not hard to get. I can
Yeah.
get a hold of that. Anyway, it's not up
Yep.
there yet.
Yep, no,
But now that everything is done digitally, it's not like somebody's got to go out there and do something. It's a matter of whoever you drive by and you do it. Okay, and Ruth, you're going to talk about council expenses. Hello.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Clarkson. This report brings forward council expenses submitted for the month of July and the remainder of expenses submitted for the month of June for council's consideration and approval. Thank you.
Motion, please.
Sure.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Windover, Councillor Franzen, all in favor. That is carried. Lame duck restricted acts, I think we've been over that. Do we have a motion or a comment?
motion to receive.
Okay. And a seconder? Deputy Mayor Windover, all in favor. Motion is carried. Compliance Audit Committee. Jesse.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor Clarkson. In preparation for the 2022 municipal election and in accordance with Section 88 of the Municipal Elections Act, all municipalities must appoint a compliance audit committee before October 1st. Previously, the municipality has participated in a joint compliance audit committee with other townships in the county and intends to do so again for this election. And clerks worked collaboratively to find members for the committee and to prepare the terms of reference. This report is just for information. However, a bylaw is on today's agenda to appoint members to the committee and to approve the terms of reference.
Okay, so do you want us to appoint members on the committee today?
There's a bylaw on the agenda to appoint the members. This report is just for information.
Okay, so we don't have to do anything with this, but we do have to have a motion to accept it.
Right.
Okay, Councillor Armstrong.
Motion to receive.
Councillor Franzen, all in favor? Motion is carried. Now, a motion to receive all of our correspondence unless you want to pull something out.
Yeah.
That's Deputy Mayor Windover and Councillor Armstrong. All in favor? Motion is carried. Correspondence for action, Town of Elmer Warming and Cooling Center Policy.
Motion received.
And seconded by Councillor Armstrong. All in favor? Motion is carried. Bylaws on the agenda.
Thank you. Through you, there were two bylaws on today's agenda that did not have a corresponding public meeting or staff report. The first is B 2022-92, which is the bylaw to stop up and close and transfer the original shore road allowance for properties in Series 34. And the second is B 2022-94, which is a bylaw to appoint Sean Moore as Deputy Fire Chief.
Okay, and we don't need a motion for that. Let's stop up and close cell Series 34. We need a motion for this. Does anybody want to speak to this, or we just need a motion? Councillor
Motion to
Armstrong and Councillor Franzen, all in favor? Motion is carried. Appointment of Compliance Audit Committee. Is this one we normally have? Is this something new?
For the election.
Elections.
Oh, for the election, okay. Who's in compliance there?
I'll make the motion.
Councillor Franzen and Councillor Armstrong, all in favor? Motion is carried. Appointment of a Deputy Fire Chief. Motion, please. Deputy Mayor Windover and Councillor Armstrong, all in favor. Motion is carried. Councillor Armstrong, you're going to introduce your notice of motion.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is with regard to the section of Highway County Road 507 that goes from Baldwin Bay Road up to just past Baker Drive, connecting with the section that was redone last year up to Salmon Lake Road. I don't know that I need to read the whole thing. No. Anyway, it has been the source of numerous complaints throughout the summer. It has been a 4-month project, very disruptive, some safety and health issues stemming from the fact that there was a determination by the county that this section of road would not receive hot mix asphalt service, but rather it's receiving a double surface treatment, which to me is what we call tar and chip. That's how I know it. And that was based on a traffic volume study that was done in 2020, which of course, as we all know, is in the middle of COVID, and seasonal residents were asked not to come up here. And in fact, in that part of the municipality, 80% of the population is seasonal. So it was clearly a skewed traffic study report. So it's done or almost done. Can't do anything about it. However, my motion is that we respectfully request the county to update its traffic volume data with post-COVID data, which is more realistic. Review the financial projections between a hot mix asphalt surface and a double surface treatment on an annual basis, which from the figures I've seen amounts to $40,000 a year over a 75-year period. And finally, to give consideration to applying hot mix asphalt to all sections of County Road 507 in the future.
Okay. Well said. Do we have comments?
So are you sort of
You want this to go to the county, I assume?
Yes,
recommend it just
precisely.
goes to county?
Yes, we don't own it. We don't have jurisdiction. However, our residents use it. I think there were something like 600 residents that live on that section of the road, so, or have to travel by it.
We do get a lot of complaints, there's no question about that.
So do we have a motion to approve?
I'll second that motion.
Yeah, I think send it, yeah.
And keep in mind that what you're going to get back is they've got like 500 miles of road in the same condition. But it doesn't hurt to raise the flag.
But there's been so much construction on that road in the last 10 or 15 years that somehow you wonder if there haven't been mistakes made by only having the tar and chip.
Well, if you had sat on the county like Ron and I have, about once a month, we hear about the road between Selwyn and Bridgenorth. You want to talk about a mess.
Yeah.
So these problems that you're speaking of are not uncommon in the county.
Right.
They make these boo-boos every so often, and then they try to fix them. And usually when they try to fix them, they get worse. So yes, absolutely, it needs to go to the county.
Yeah.
So all in favor of that?
Yeah.
And that motion is carried. Thank you. Liaison reports. Do we have any from external boards? Seeing none. Information items. I have one. I'm concerned about a counselor who's putting a lot of information out on social media concerning our roads depot, problems with it, problems that aren't with it, whatever. I think right now we would be very careful and very prudent to keep our remarks about problems that may be with the roads depots to ourselves. So I think going forward, and I have verified whether or not that is true, but we should be very, very careful what we're saying. These comments are certainly not out to the public, but they're not in caucus, so anybody who gets them is free to talk about them and go wherever. So I think we all know that we've got some issues, but I think the more that those issues are kept within council until things get straightened out, I think the better. I have been certainly concerned. Now we need a motion to go into closed. Deputy Mayor Windover and Councillor Franzen.
Sure.
All in favor?
Yep. Huh?
not as much as the public ones do.
They don't.
Okay, motion to rise from close, please.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Windover and Councillor Armstrong, all in favor? And that is carried. Business arising from closed. I don't think we have any, I think the business is, okay. Adoption of the minutes from the closed from August the 9th, please.
Sure.
Councillor Armstrong, Councillor Deputy Mayor Windover, all in favor? Motion is carried. Adoption of confirming bylaw. Motion to approve confirming bylaw. Councillor Franzen, Councillor Armstrong, all in favor.
Good.
Motion is carried. Adjournment.
Yes.
Motion. Yes, yes, yes. Motion is carried.